The beginning of each painting holds the promise of adventure like the mystery of a gigantic puzzle waiting to be solved. Art exploration leads me down paths of creativity and self-realization. Fears and insecurities are faced. Frustrations and wonders are encountered. Color and layers are revealed. Working with mixed media and cold wax on several wood panels at a time allows for spontaneity and energy needed by each piece. Squeegees, bottle caps, sticks, and steel wool are among the fine marking tools I use. Collage elements and dry pigments serve as another desirable layer when incorporated into the wax process. Scraping and revealing previous layers means discovery. Inspiration for paintings lie everywhere in Earth's layers and in architectural decay. The art of Richard Dibincorn, Wayne Thiebaud, Brian Rettenberg, Rex Ray, and countless others serve as constant nutrition. My art exploration has made me aware that I am a piece of this gigantic puzzle. Bonnie Anthony.
I thought it would be interesting for you to learn some of the tools I use when creating my paintings with cold wax. They're really fun. And here's one that you are even probably familiar with. Hi, my name is Carol McIntyre, and I fell in love with cold wax with oil in the fall of 2019. Shortly after that, I fortunately was able to take some excellent live and online courses to learn about this fascinating medium. My art career expands across 30 years, starting with watercolor, going into pencil, pastel, oils, acrylic, mixed media, and now cold wax. Cold wax is similar to the consistency of Crisco. In fact, if you put the two together, you can mix them up, but don't put cold wax in your kitchen. It doesn't taste very good. So when I have my cold wax on my palette, I first mix a pile of oil paint, 2 or 3 piles, and then I add the same amount of cold wax to it. It's kind of a 50-50 ratio. And I'm using a palette knife to mix it up. And then I start playing with my tools and applying a gazillion layers to the painting. One of the reasons I really love cold wax is because it is so physical. I can scrape, apply, put collage, stencil, and just really explore the medium. The first decision I make when I start a painting is the color palette. So I have a preconceived idea of the color scheme, and I use it as I think of it as an iceberg. I take that color scheme and then explore with it. I do this because I'm trying to avoid mixing mud, and I'm trying to create color harmony. Once I get going, then I have no preconceived idea of what the visual outcome will be. About 2/3 into the painting and I start to have a conversation, much like fiction writers talk about a conversation with their characters. And so the painting and I sort of decide where it's going to go. Overall, though, I always have 4 intentions with my paintings. They are to create beauty, color harmony, mystery, and depth. I'm trying to draw you into the painting and perhaps spark your imagination or get you to start asking questions about yourself, the painting, or the artist. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have an opportunity to stop by to see this wonderful show.
Hi, I'm Carol Mordecai Myers, and I'm happy to be a part of the wax show that Abby has put together here at Kreuzer Gallery. I have 3 pieces here hanging, and they're all encaustic. And I started encaustic back in the early 2000s and kind of dipped my toe back into it now and again. I generally work in actually a lot of different mediums. There's a nice thing about encaustic and working in encaustic is there's an immediacy to it. So it is pigment, and the vehicle for it is melted wax, melted beeswax with a little bit of damar varnish, which raises the temperature slightly. And just like oil paint uses oil for its medium, or watercolors uses gum arabic, this medium is the beeswax. And it's very old medium. There are really old portraits from the Fayum portraits, they're called, from around the 1st century AD. They're Egyptian, and they still are as colorful, and they've retained all the pigmentation that they had without any deterioration. So with these, I just start, one of them is fully encaustic. So what I do is I work pretty intuitively to start. I used to be more of a figurative painter and landscape, where landscape was really behind my work. And it's changed and evolved where I still think of these as landscapes, even though they may not look to the average person as a landscape, but that's what I'm thinking about. And I think about the idea of embodied presence. So that comes from my yoga background and teaching yoga, but the idea of really physically being present in a space. So whether it's the space of woods or for me in the space of my studio, painting allows me to have that kind of presence. And I hope that the pieces also have that feeling when you look at them. So the wonderful thing about encaustic is the surface feeling. There's a real sensual feeling to wax, and you can do different things with it. For example, in this one, I was able to build up more of a texture, and you can actually build up to be almost 3 inches thick if you wanted to really push those boundaries. And even though it's encaustic, my process is usually the same. I will put paint on and then I will scrape it back. With milk paint, sometimes I'll wash it back. With oil paints, I'll sand it back, and with encaustic, you can scrape it back or melt it and then pull it back. So I hope that you can come by and see this show that Abby has put together. It's really wonderful, and there are some different kinds of things going on. So there's encaustic, and there also is cold wax, which also uses wax that is with turpentine, and that is a medium for oil paint. So you'll see a variety of work, and I hope you could make it.
Hi everybody. Hey, my name is Donna Martin, and I'm here at the gallery. Wanted to tell you a little bit more about my art and about who I am. So, as for me, I was born and raised in Colorado. How lucky am I? And this is the only place I would ever want to live. And being born and raised in Colorado, I think inspires my artwork and my love of nature. I love to be out hiking. I love to be in the mountains. And so that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from. So in my work, you'll see a lot of mountains and trees and kind of landscapes. And I love encaustic because it gives the pieces just a really cool, dreamy, kind of ethereal feel to them. And there's so much versatility with encaustic. And so I'm so happy to be part of this exhibit and so lucky to be here. I'm very honored to be here. So thank you. And
hi, I'm DiPasquale, and I'm an encaustic artist. I also do cold wax and mixed media. And first of all, I want to thank Abby for putting together such a beautifully curated show. I have never been part of a show where we're all doing the same medium, and so it was really a privilege and honor, and just an incredibly beautiful show to see all of us different encaustic and cold wax artists together. So thank you. I've been doing encaustic for about 15 years. I'm trained as a decorative painter, so I did a lot of layering of colors on walls and marbling and wood graining and things like that. So when I happened upon encaustic, it was like this perfect combination of doing what I've known, the textures and the layers, and then playing with this really incredible, this hot wax, like melted crayons. So I felt like a child again. It was very playful, and it is a very playful and forgiving medium. I love the impermanence of it, the ability to put something on and then scrape it off. There's really, it's so forgiving, which is really good for me. You can cover it up if you don't like it, you can scrape it back, you can mold, you can almost sculpt with the clay or with the wax, almost clay-like feel. And then the layering, creating a texture, and revealing what was in the past is really something that I love to do. All of these pictures, all of these works have been in process, so kind of like me, I'm in work in process, and I did these a few years ago, and then I come back to it and I'm like, this just doesn't resonate for me anymore. And so I basically redid all of these. This one I started a while back. I have eggshells in there and I have the words written eggshells, and it was pretty simplistic. And then coming back over for this show, I just really wanted to add more detail, drew on the eggs and some more drippings, and just embellished it in a way that felt more finished to me. You know, sometimes it's hard to know when a piece is done, and sometimes it feels done, and then I can revisit it and go, you know, I want to change it up a bit. So it's, my art is ever evolving, as am I.
I'm Melissa Porter, mixed media artist. I call myself that because in addition to the encaustic work that's showing in the gallery, I also create shadow boxes with found objects and vintage clock cases. So my background and education is in photography. I earned my BFA from the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, Michigan, where I'm from. For me, the transition between encaustic and photography was a real natural one. The processes for me are similar. Very much when you're in the darkroom and you're waiting for the image in the tray to arise, that anticipation. I get that when I'm working in layers with wax and paper products. The wax tends to get cloudy when you're working with it. It dissipates over time, but there's that anticipation of, did I get it? Is it there? Is it real? My work process for me is, it tells stories, and I process my environment and my experiences through my art. I use a lot of symbolism in my art so that it isn't really just all about me, and that so more people can relate to it. A couple of the symbols that show up very frequently in my work are the violin. For me, since seeing that image that Man Ray created where he made the shape of a woman into a violin, that to me has always been a very feminine symbol that I use. My grandma also collected blue glass violins, so sometimes in my work it's a reference to my family, myself, women that I've crossed paths with along the way that have influenced me one way or another. This piece that's titled Energy is layered with the symbolism. The base layer is sheet music that I found. It's titled Returning from Vacation, because in my mind, who doesn't want to always feel like they've just come back from vacation? The yellow leaf is a symbol that shows up very frequently in my work. I was first introduced to this concept of the sacrificial leaf when I was on family vacation in Key West. We had taken a kayaking trip through the mangrove forest, which grows off the coast. The mangrove is actually a freshwater plant that is able to survive in the salt water. By its intricate filtration system, it sends all the toxins to one leaf that turns yellow and then of course falls off. It shows up in my work sometimes as a reminder to myself not to overextend myself. In this particular piece, it is actually exactly that, a reminder to remain balanced in what I give and what I receive. In this piece too, we have the symbol of the birch tree or the aspen, depending on where you're from. For myself, I find going into nature to be soothing to my soul, and I find inspiration there. So a lot of those symbols show up in my work from time to time. If you're interested, you can go to my website and see more of my work, melissaporterartist.com.
My name is Sarah Reitinger. I was born in Washington State to a military family. Being military for me meant that there were a lot of moves before I turned 12. Around that time, my father was stationed in Colorado. I found myself for the first time being in the same place for more than a couple years and finding some footing, growing some roots. My family's predominantly built of fishermen. As a kid, that translated to many days being filled next to rivers in the mountains. I didn't share the same level of commitment to the sport. However, I took it as an opportunity to explore. allowing myself to be completely immersed within the seclusion of nature, becoming grounded and connected with those native elements, collecting trinkets of stones and bones of animals along the way. I was and still am in awe at the depth of peace to be found within these places of nature. A reminder that change is the forever constant, that nature refuses to rush, yet accomplishes everything magnificently. That even in the dark, muddy places, intricate beauty can be fostered. It is the intention of my work to share these quiet moments and reassuring realizations. For the past 3 years, I've been working with encaustic medium. I'm enamored at its bend towards spontaneity that prompts a truly mesmeric creation process. I like to imagine in nature the action of change and action of growth on varying degrees, allowing that concept to inspire non-representational and landscape works. I received a degree in fine arts with UCCS, as well as a teaching license through the BOCES program. I'm in my 7th year teaching art locally at the elementary level. I am grateful daily for the opportunity to not only share the benefits from creating art, but also share the power of connection with art that is to be discovered and experienced.
Hello, my name is Shannon Mello. I am a mixed media artist, mostly concentrating in the medium of encaustic. I started encaustic in 2018. Been doing art for the majority of my life, I would say, starting with acrylic when I was very, very young and doing murals through college, helping my mother, who was also an artist. When I started encaustic, this was it for me. It's probably because I'm such a tactile person. This material allows you to manipulate it very quickly, right away. It works with layers, and I love that property with it because it allows me to create very, very natural landscapes, which is the majority of my artwork. In these pieces, for instance, I have not only encaustic, which I should say is a beeswax resin combination that's melted, which then I apply with a brush once it's melted and melt it with a torch. But within these layers, there's anything from oil paint, there's pan pastels, and there's shellac, which is actually like a furniture shellac. When you burn it, it almost breaks up into these cellular-like patterns, which still lends itself to that very natural feel. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Oh, and alcohol inks. So you have all of these materials and different media that work so nicely in encaustic because you're working with layers. And again, I'm able to mess with it. I can carve into it. I can manipulate it very, very quickly while I'm working with it. So I think that's one of my, one of the biggest draws of this medium being my absolute favorite. I'm originally from Michigan, so a lot of my work does have a water aspect to it, or at least hinted that in the mountains. Moved to Colorado in 2006 and have become a huge, always have been my whole life, a nature lover, but have become a huge advocate to keep our open spaces safe as well. So these 3 pieces, you can pick up on the water hints, along with the landscape that is inspired by Colorado. I think that's hinted in the majority of the pieces, though.
My name is Sheary Clough, and my medium is encaustic. I'm most well known for my 2D panel work. I've been working with hot wax for 30 years now, but in recent years I've been playing with taking the work off the panel, and this piece here, Bringing Balance, is maybe one of the first ways I tried to come off the surface. The scrolls came about because I was playing with what I could do with the medium. All encaustic artists know that you can use hot wax like a glue, but I wanted to know what I could do if I used the paper and the wax and started playing with it. Scrolls are interesting to me because I think of them as knowledge, our first books. And so with this piece, you have space, you have room for growth. And then after I made the scrolls, and I wanted to think of what I could do to create form. And I've been very interested in working with textiles recently. And so the binding, the knotting creates the connection that eventually led to the piece, the other piece in my show, Independent, which came completely off the panel. To me, it's sort of course, it honors our local free weekly newspaper, The Indy. Their motto is Truth Matters, which in this day and age matters the most. And they are so supportive of our community. So much of the paper in this piece is from the Indy. But beyond that, we have the form of maybe figurative, maybe armor. We have strength with the binding, yet we have flexibility. I'm not going to do it now, but besides the shield, you can actually play with the scrolls and bend them and shape them and have more of a DNA shape. I hope you get a chance to come in and see wax, and thanks. Nice to meet you.
My name is Tish Lacy Reed, and I'm in this amazing show at Kreuzer Gallery with 9 other artists who work in wax. So I work in cold wax. I used to work in encaustic, which is painting with pigmented beeswax. And that remains solid at room temperature, so you have to heat it to a liquid state to manipulate it on your work surface. Well, in modern times, they figured out a way to add polymers and resins to beeswax to keep it pliable at room temperature. So it's very much like Crisco. If you're really young, you may not know what that is any longer, but it was used in baking. The nice thing about it is because encaustics, when they come to a smoke when you're heating them, that's formaldehyde, so it's quite toxic, but cold wax is not toxic at all unless you heat it, because the polymers and such that they put in there, they react to the heat. So part of my process is you mix 50-50% between oil and cold wax and apply it to the surface. I don't use a lot of brushes. I use little squeegees and any kind of a mark making tool that I can find. You can just let your imagination run wild. A lot of these pieces have 5 or 6 previous paintings, so to speak. So it's almost like being pregnant. So for 9 months, you're pregnant, you have to go through all these different stages. And at the end, even though the labor pains are rough, you end up with a beautiful outcome, whether it be child or painting. So, I've been working in this medium now for about 3 years, and I do teach classes here also at Kreuzer Gallery. If you might be interested in that, please give Abby your number. I probably won't have a class until after the first of the year, but I just want to let you know that you cannot fail at this medium. It's impossible. If you don't like what you've done, you can just keep painting over it and over it and over it, and you still get the essence and the history of the pieces before, almost like an archaeologist goes and does a dig to bring up the treasures that have been buried. Well, again, my name is Tish Lacy Reed. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact Abby and she'll give them to me.